Awesome. Hi everyone, welcome to SIG Autoscaling / Karpenter working group for Monday the 9th of October 2023. Yeah, discussion on the cluster autoscaler Karpenter API alignment proposal. Does anyone have any points they want to start off with? I know there's been a sort of few discussions via Slack and DMs, but
Yeah, I think we kind of ended the discussion last time with a few action items. I know, Guy, you weren't here. And the one remaining action item that we were kind of ambiguous about was, well, I guess there were a couple. So one was that me and Maciek would work on kind of tidying up the doc and aligning on some things that we were maybe disagreeing on, which we were having discussions in DMs and talking over on the actual alignment proposal. And then the last one was that we would try and go to SIG Arch and have a discussion with them. Although as we were more, me and Maciek were talking, and the more like I think some of us were talking in general, we were kind of wondering why we're counting that as an action item as almost a prerequisite for the last piece to us joining the SIG. I think the expectation, understanding, and even just talking with Jack and his experience with Cluster API was that talking with SIG Arch is going to be a more difficult conversation to have if we're not like in terms of alignment on like a larger scale. It's going to be a more difficult conversation to have if we're kind of sitting outside as an external project and then Cass is inside as an internal project. And how does that work? And it seems kind of like an odd thing to have an external project drive the upstream alignment of these things long term. So well, we were going to still try, I guess, regardless. And then SIG Arch obviously canceled the meeting that we were going to have on Thursday and then pushed it out 2 weeks. And so I think this conversation is coming back up of like, do we count this as a prerequisite? Can we talk about these things after, we're both in the SIG and can kind of approach it as this is a Kubernetes alignment from the auto scaling side rather than from an external project and from a internal project.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I sort of caught up on most of that context since last time around. You've got your hand up, Dirk. Is there anything you want to add to that? Or...
Yeah, sure. So definitely related to what Jonathan just expressed. I see two possible paths forward. I think there's a super easy path, which maybe we want to take, and then there's a medium easy path. I think we've done most of as far as I can tell, we've done most of the hard work, so it hasn't been easy. But we're at the last mile, so from here on out, it should be easy. So the super easy path would be to sort of identify the doc that Jonathan's working on and that lots of folks are collaborating on as a work in progress, and to trust that both sides will continue to negotiate in good faith that document as a separate process and like remove it as acceptance criteria for that document being like finalized with definitive commitments. So that would be the super easy path, is to tell ourselves like this document is demonstrating that it's producing good collaboration, good ideas. We're working together. We're compromising in these ways. And we don't really know what the end of life of that document is. And further things might come up that are appropriate to go into the document, and we're going to be super okay with that. And we're going to separate that from like the finishing and finally, yeah, I don't want to say the same thing I just said. So that's the easy path. The medium easy path would be to kind of scope the areas of friction in the current doc. And as far as I can tell, the areas of friction are, well, the one area of friction really has to do with like the standard API that both SIG Autoscaling and Karpenter as projects under a single SIG would adopt to expose common interfaces. So that seems to be tricky semantically, because both sides make totally valid observations that, well, in fact, this interface is describing behaviors that are properly best described as autoscaling. And then Karpenter is saying, well, in fact, this interface, which is related, is best describing behaviors which are doing way more than just autoscaling. So there's this how do you find out a single semantic? That's a hard problem. One thing would be to so again, I'm describing this as medium hard because the idea would be that we would finish all this stuff and still call that document blocking in terms of acceptance. But the finishing, there's not that much to do if we're willing to compromise. Like we could say that these areas of friction get kicked out of scope for that document, and so we just reword the document to say these are actually not opportunistic surface areas for standardization because they're too different. And I think we both know we might want to be working on that down the road. But in terms of getting that doc nice and clean and getting it into a committable state, we actually just remove those areas so all the things that are sort of up for negotiation with respect to node lifecycle, if there's something that this is described by node lifecycle from the Karpenter area, that would just get kicked out of the doc, and it would be no longer a candidate for standardization because we've described and we've documented that there is less overlap than we initially thought. So we initially thought like, okay, these are the same things, but then as we discussed it with the goal of describing a common semantic, it seems that we've revealed, in fact, they're not the same, they're different. So super easy path is to say all the stuff I'm describing in the doc, we're going to keep doing, and we're not going to worry about end of life. Medium easy is to identify the things in the doc that we know are definitely going to take like up to 18 months to resolve and just kick them out of the doc and then clean up the doc and get it into a committable state. Go ahead, Jonathan. Or Guy, if you want to respond to
that. Happy to let Jonathan fire in, and then yeah.
Yeah, I guess my personal opinion is if we remove the areas of scope which we feel are I guess contentious in the document, we're now talking about a document that has no purpose in my mind. Like I think that the main point, and I don't know if it has quite no purpose, maybe that's a little too extreme, but the areas that are covering like this shared API alignment, I guess is the main purpose around the doc in terms of like, maybe there's some behavioral pieces, but also I think the behavioral pieces are a tad contentious because they talk about things that are probably going to be a long pole. In my mind, like I think there's a lot of discussion that's happening. Like there's an open cap, for instance, that's happening on declarative node draining, which might be interesting to think about in the context of Cass and Karpenter and how we could maybe align around the surface. I mean, we should probably be involved in that conversation as well as if we should also think about like what is the standard way that we should do this generally, and that's part of the scope of the document. But I do think it's a longer pole discussion with like upstream. So it makes me start to question like, okay, well, if we pull out the pieces of this document that are contentious, we're kind of paring it down to just like conceptual document alignment. Like that's basically the piece that Maciek and I had agreed on is like, okay, we need to get some like upstream documentation that we agree on that's like in upstream that describes autoscaling, describes downscaling, that kind of thing. And then kind of come to some conceptual agreement on term alignment. But beyond that, I don't know how much comes out of it if we just decide to accept it now. And so then I'm like, it starts to be a question of, okay, I personally think the better option is that we punt on, well, not punt on it, but that we like decide to continue to work on it and collaborate on it long term, with knowing that a lot of these discussions are going to be like involving a lot of other people outside of just ourselves, but kind of driving that conversation in upstream.
Guy, I want to give you a chance. Do you have any?
Yeah. I guess my sort of feeling on it is that there has been a lot of useful discussion on it, and I think we have there has been a fairly good focus on like and frequent reference back to what how what do we see with end users of both projects, like how do we think they'll feel, but it doesn't feel like there's been a lot of actual end user input or feedback to this point, and that I guess is almost one of my concerns if we kick out the contentious bits of like I'd like to keep them in the doc and get to the point where we can get enough attention on it that we do get end users like going, oh, okay, so these are the bits of confusion or things where actually they tell us, no, that's not a point of confusion. We're fine with, you know, node lifecycle being a different API space to auto-scaling API surface. So I am sort of feeling like the easy path would be my preferred direction at the moment. Not fully speaking for the sake of the moment, since just personal opinion, but
cool. So you mean keeping the doc moving forward, but decoupling it from the acceptance criteria? Yes,
because as you said, it like there has been good collaboration from both sides. Like we've identified a number of good things, and like we've identified areas where actually we've gone, oh, actually, that, as you said, there's not a conflict here. Those are two different things. And I think, to me, actually, the core thing for adoption is, as Maciek and Jonathan have been discussing, like just documentation of like, cool, I'm a user coming to Kubernetes for the first time. What are my options for auto scaling a cluster?
So that makes sense. I want to quickly respond to Jonathan's comment, and then I'll let David talk. I think that there is a valid story in doing the work of documenting in this particular document that you've prepared, Jonathan, something that says we are not going to mutate the APIs in the near term. Like, we're going to keep them as they are, and the document justifies why, because folks might have valid skepticism about, okay, so we've got two projects, why aren't they using a common API? And we can refer them to this document. And to the extent that we continue to work on it, which is going to be true no matter what, I'm not convinced that that document as structured is the right document for the 18 months, 36-month process going forward for node lifecycle. I think those are going to be, each one of those line items is going to be its own document, as horrible as that might sound to folks who hate documentation. But like every single proposed change eventually becomes like its own kept, so to speak. And so that's going to be 3 to 5 pages long with lots of justification. So the value of the document that you've written up, Jonathan, describes the process over the last 2 or 3 months, which is that we wanted Karpenter and SIG Autoscaling identify an opportunity to grow both projects to make SIG Autoscaling healthier through the combination of these two under one umbrella. And this document describes the sausage making that went on to make that sort of justifiable from an engineering standpoint. So that's sort of what I mean. It's not as easy as you guys are saying. We could just literally leave that document as is and trust that it's going to evolve. The more work to fashion that document into a kind of permanent form and concretize it and attach it to this process of acceptance would be the historical record that this is how we arrived at the conclusion to accept and why we arrived at the particular criteria that we did.
Got it.
And then I'll shut up.
I'll let folks, if they want to respond to that first. Otherwise, I'll give it a second.
Yeah, I guess I am on board with that. I think that, as always with the SIG at the moment, my concern will be about bandwidth to do that work going forward. It feels like there's definitely engineering resources there from AWS side. Obviously, with other cloud providers being interested in implementing Karpenter as well for them, I would hope some of that comes from there. But yeah, historically, usual SIG struggles of not enough people for all the work we want to do. but I think there would still be value in that document, at least of going, we have all these things we want to do. Please give us engineering resource to help.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I mean, I've seen like a lot of progress since we started down this path, and I think, you know, accepting Karpenter into the SIG is a great step, and I don't think that things are gonna stop. I mean, I think they're just gonna keep going, right? I think there's a vested interest to try and make the user experience, like you called out. Hey, we should get some user input, which is going to take some time. Right now, we're in a doc that we're still hashing out, but like that's going to take time. And I think we all want the best for our end users. And I see a lot of continued opportunities for collaboration moving forward. And so, yeah, I'm excited to move things forward and help whatever way I can with, you know, getting user interviews, documentation, things like that. But yeah, I think the practical step, short-term step in my mind is also like the labeling thing. And if that's something we want to, you know, just change to a more, you know, agreed on short-term label thing to have something in the short term, or we want to try and just have the totally separate paths thing until we kind of maybe iron out the bigger, you know, picture of things. And I think that's the kind of path that I think that's the decision in my mind. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, maybe we can have a separate issue or something to voice thoughts on that. And we can definitely, I think as Guy says, we should solicit user input explicitly, so we can just get on the roadshow and force users to voice their opinions in terms of fast tracking an acceptable common solution, or keeping the status quo with the idea that, as Guy says, like part of it is resources, part of it is the fact that some of these solutions, like this is not a perfect marriage, Karpenter and cluster autoscaler under a single umbrella, as the CNCF like distributed charter is currently set up. And so there's gonna be a lot of work to say, what does something like Karpenter and something like cluster autoscaler, how do they situate themselves in common? And we would work with SIGARC and we work with SIGNode, and that's going to take a long time. And so to get users to vote on, given that scenario, do we want to just keep the Karpenter specific and the cluster autoscaler specific interfaces? Is that appropriate under SIG autoscaler? Or do we want to fast track something where we pick a new thing and then we cut a new beta release or whatever on both projects to hit this new interface? My vote would be for the former, that we just agree to keep the separation. I feel like that's more user-friendly in the short term and less likely, in my experience as an engineer, less likely to produce stuff that's undesirable and sticks around for 20 years. But I think we should get user feedback on that. And again, this can be sort of separate from the doc. I think the doc describes where things stand, and if we feel confident joining forces under one SIG, then we need to start soliciting the users and really feel like they're stakeholders in what's coming in the future.
Yeah, I'm agreed that I sort of feel building anything short term just for the purposes of saying, oh look, we have unified something, without, I think, fully hashing out all of the areas. It feels like it's likely to result in something suboptimal that then we are committed to supporting for, you know, at least a year based on release schedules, etc. I think the more user friendly thing is going to be continuing as we currently are for now, getting the user feedback and designing something in collaboration with our users that is maintainable for the long term. Cool. I don't know. Sounds like we're all on the same page. In terms of action items, I will grab some time with Marcin and try to get Maciek involved, just to make sure they're don't have any major objections to the proposed course from the SIG side, and try to make sure we can get both of them along to catch up next week. Do we want to do anything in terms of creating a new document about the path forward? Because as you say, I think the existing document is useful as an artifact of like the discussions that we've had to get to this point.
Go ahead, Jonathan. I'm not sure who was first. Go ahead, Jonathan, if you want.
It was a race. I'm not sure what the prior art is for doing something like this, but would it be worthwhile to just have like an updated section at the bottom? So like here's like the record of where we were. I definitely don't want to delete any of the comments or any of the graffiti art that's on there right now. Like I think we should obviously maintain that context. I wonder if it's worth it just drawing a line and being like, here's what we've discussed, here's what we've decided given the context. And then, because I think Jack's right, we're going to end up spinning off separate conversations off of all these things anyway. So we're not going to be probably working off of this doc at like once we're done giving the updated context. And I'm happy to provide that if we want. Like, I don't think it should be a long thing. It should be like, hey, we discussed these things and here's what we decided based off of the scope of all these items. And we're kind of going to continue to plan to collaborate on these items, but at this point in time, we're going to decide to move forward as separate API surfaces. And I think necessarily to Jack's point, like, and to your point, Guy, I think if we're now two projects that are sitting inside the same upstream repo or upstream governance body, I think it's necessarily going to cause more people to ask questions about these things, and then necessarily going to cause more user involvement. So yep. I think over time we're gonna see more people asking questions about this, and that's gonna give us a lot stronger signal than trying to guess at it right now.
Agreed.
Yeah, I don't think we have to complicate it. I feel like just maybe obviously the biggest thing is communicating on the open PR to join the node and just making a comment there. And then we could also put a note in the doc here, and between those two notes, I think that's fair, and just that we're going to continue to work and go for a long-term goal with more, longer-term supportability path as we continue to hash things out. So, yeah.
I'd be happy. So I offered to craft an issue that gets that user feedback as far as what do we do in the short term. I'll wait for you, Guy, to get a temperature from the rest of the SIG leads on the likelihood of this being decoupled from acceptance criteria, and we can make that sort of a post joining issue as opposed to like before. So let's wait till we have consensus that the project will join, and then I'll open that issue. And I'm happy to drive that if that's appropriate, or if not, I'm happy to stand down.
I think it would be a nice demonstration of immediately getting buy-in from other companies that are like looking to adopt the project. So yeah, that'd be great.
Another idea could also be that because with KubeCon at the coming up here really soon, to just have a little PR blurb of sorts of letting people know what's happening. So
yeah, so myself and Marcin are down to give a SIG update anyway. So I was definitely intending on including like something on an update on what the state of discussions were, whatever the case was. If we can get it to a good point to shout about things positively and shout potentially about the adoption, that would, I think, be ideal from a PR perspective, and hopefully getting the community excited and providing feedback early. But
Yeah, we could use that as well to connect to the user feedback part. So if we wanted to like get some user questions and tie it to the PR thing, like that could, I don't know, just another idea that might be interesting. Maybe have a form or something with some pointed questions to get some just rough data on, you know, directions from the users.
Yeah, that's I'll have the sync with the rest of SIG leadership / CA leadership, and I think if we can come to an agreement, then I think potentially link out to a form or something and start soliciting feedback as part of that talk. That could be pretty good mechanism. Yeah, nice idea. Thanks. Jonathan?
Yeah, so just as I understand it, I'm just confirming action items here. Guy, you're going to follow up with Marcina Mychek, and then UCA leadership, and
Yep.
on the direction we're proposing here, which is the short-term thinking of like let's separate this alignment. Let's just be happy with our separate APIs for now, and we'll get more user feedback over time, and then we'll ideally reconvene next Monday to discuss, like, assuming that is a positive feedback on that process. We'll discuss next Monday on like the actual tangible items that would need to happen for that to formally occur. Along with Jack and me, like having follow-ups. Like I think we'll both hold on those discussions. Jack and I will kind of have our follow-up action items that will result based on how those conversations go. Yeah.
Sounds like it's all dependent on me chasing down some people, but
Welcome back.
Go away for holiday, miss a few meetings, and come back and you're asked to do things. Okay, awesome. If there's not anything else, then see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.